I'm Ron Levine from SIPA, and I am a morning person, so hopefully I can convey some of the my natural enthusiasm to you here this early. This is a good subject, I think, and I think we'll have time for a good discussion a little later about some of your experiences. I know when I first started, I came into the Washington Post and as an intern after college, and Ben Bradley was showing us around, and Woodward and all this stuff. And if you would have asked me any time during those few months where the marketing department was, where the advertising department was, I could not have told you, and I'm sure they wouldn't have wanted me knowing. It was that church-state thing we heard a lot about, and now many years later, I think it's become almost turned on its head that if you don't cooperate, if there isn't a lot of integration between editorial, marketing, advertising, then you're really going to lose out. I know yesterday, just walking around, listening to some of the talks, Don Johnston was up here with me and talking about his 3 blogs. The first 2 were I think run by editorial people, but now the third one was being run by a marketing person. So I think he might comment a little later on how that's working. And Aaron Steinberg from UCG last night, we were talking, and he says he really feels he wants to talk more with marketing to let them know, he knows the product better than anyone. So he wants to convey that so they can get it right. In social media now, Jenny Fukumoto was saying that so on Facebook Reagan has a huge Facebook following, and on that following, the marketing department is asking these questions to their audience. What do you want to read about? What do you need to know? And now she's taking that information and giving it to editorial to use about what to write about. Where in the past, it was more of a guess. Editorial was, this is what we're going to write about. We'll see who's interested. And now it's so much more targeted. And then this morning, even Jennifer from Aviation Week, we were talking, and that she's trying to get. It sounded more old school, like you think it's all changed everywhere. And then she was telling me that no, her reporters are. It's a tough sell trying to get them to help more with some of her marketing, and she's just asking them to talk about it more, publicize it, keep your quality content, but just give a shout out to us a little more. And then Eleanor from Business Management Daily was also very interesting in that she has some good marketing copywriters and for renewals. But then she said she has now used some of the writers for marketing copy, because they have some quirkiness, I think, and it adds a little to that. So I think we'll call on her a little later. So as a main presentation here, this is Mike Grebb from the executive editor of Cablefax, and I think we're really happy to have Mike. We had a discussion this week, and it sort of started with some social media, and then a lot of this other stuff came up. So I think we're in for a good discussion here.
Yeah, well, thanks, Ron. So thanks everybody for being here, and this is one of those interesting subjects that wouldn't have been even a topic 10 years ago, because like you said, it just wasn't even, you didn't even discuss kind of any of this kind of integration or any kind of, really it's just about communication between the marketing side and the editorial side, the journalists, the reporters, and then what you guys do. And then I would throw into that as well ad sales, which at some places is obviously part of the marketing department. In other places, like where we are, it's pretty separate. But they obviously have some similar functions that are definitely different from editorial. And they're both parts of the business that I think in the past had been very separate from editorial. There wasn't it wasn't like there was a lack of coordination. It was literally just a lack of even communicating, whether it was in meetings or in email or whatever the case may be, or on the phone. You just never talked at all. And so they were off doing their own thing. We were off doing our own thing. And I've been doing this for almost 20 years, mostly in the B2B world. So I've worked for a lot of different newsletters and a lot of different B2B publications. And really, I think the shift, and just so that people know just what area we cover, if you're unfamiliar with the publication, is, we cover the television industry, as the name would suggest. It's the cable side. So we really don't cover the broadcast networks as much. We cover all the cable networks. We cover the cable operators like Time Warner Cable and Comcast and all those guys, the satellite guys, all the distributors of content, all the people who send you those big, huge bills every month. We cover all those guys. And that entire industry has been shifting and changing. It's been a really exciting time. And what's happened in the last few years has really been that social media has really, I think, helped bring together the marketing and the editorial departments more than anything else. It's not all about social media, as Ron said. I mean, we originally talked about this as being very focused on social media, and that's definitely a part of it, and I'm going to talk about some of that. But it's really about a lot more than that. And when we talk about something like social media success, what does that mean? What exactly is that? And it's going to be different for everybody in this room, depending on what your audience is and what you do and what I assume, in the world of B2B, if you're doing a specialized publication, obviously you have very different audiences that use social media differently, that respond to different types of marketing messages differently, that have a different way that they want to advertise, if it's an advertising thing, or to sponsor things. Some people like to do sponsorship of events, and they don't like to do any display advertising. Other people love getting lots of marketing information and emails and stuff, and other people hate it, and they throw it into their spam filter. And a lot of times it depends on the culture of the industry that you cover, or in the case, we have a few publications that actually cover professions that I'll talk about, and that's a little different than an industry, in my opinion. I think a profession is like the PR industry, for example, or something, or even the marketing industry is a little bit different when you're covering that versus an industry like cable or something. So what does this mean? As I said, it's different for everybody depending on what your audience is. You really do have to know your audience, and you can't force it. If your audience is not using Twitter a lot, we have an audience. I'll just give you an example. CableFax, because we cover the cable industry, but we really cover the higher level executives. I mean, we specialize on the sort of EVP level, SVP and up, really. But a lot of EVPs, a lot of CEOs read us. These are not people who are watching their Twitter feeds all day. And they're not on Facebook all day, and they might do a little bit of stuff, and some do more than others, but it's not part of the culture. They've got meetings all day. That's our audience. We have those very high-level people. We have other people that cover, say, something where you're dealing with a lot of engineers or a lot of people that are at the mid-levels or the lower levels. They're going to be maybe using social media a lot more. They're also going to be interacting a lot more because they might be in a type of field where there's a lot of information sharing and it's not as competitive, which is often the case with engineers. They like to share what they're working on and solve each other's problems and things like that. But if you're talking about executives who are competing for ratings or something like that, they're not exactly really giddy about going online and sharing their secrets with their competitors. So that's part of what you have to understand your industry, the culture of your industry. If you're doing something like in the medical profession, there might be a lot of, in science and that sort of thing, I would think there'd be a lot of sharing, but just keep track of what it is and don't try to, you're not going to change, what we've found is that we're not going to change the culture. We use it in a very targeted way for our audience. We have other publications that are within the media group. We do PR News, which I don't have anything to do with, but I'm familiar with, is one of our publications that my boss runs. And they have a lot more numbers and a lot more interaction and a lot more engagement on social media than we do. And in some ways, they focus on it more than us, so that's part of it, but it's also part of the fact that PR people, just by the very nature of what they do, have to be on social media as part of their jobs. And so it's an obvious it's an obvious fit for them, that you want to market a lot to that group, to that profession through social media because they're using it all the time. So that's where they are. You go where the people are. So that really works for them. And with us, it's more of a targeted thing where we want to really keep it. They might go a lot more broad than we would go. We would want to keep things very targeted and and hold back, not tweet quite as much, not put quite as many things on Facebook, be a little more selective about what we're doing. So yeah, be smart, not obnoxious. I mean, you have to. Every industry has a different level of obnoxiousness that they would consider to be too obnoxious in terms of marketing messages and things like that, or even the stuff that Editorial does. I mean, some people may not want us tweeting out every single link to everything we're posting on the website and telling them about everything we're doing. You just have to really know your audience. They owe you nothing. You really do have to go where they are, and that's what we found. I'm just recounting. A lot of this stuff you guys probably already know, but this is what we've been finding out as we work, specifically in social media. And then, I have don't always be selling. One thing that we do is we have, and I'll get to this in the next slide. In fact, I'll just do it right now. How we do social media is that Editorial, we have access to all the branded accounts, which really is one. I mean, when I say branded accounts, I mean, we have one branded account on each social media platform that we deal with. It's mostly for us been Twitter and Facebook. We've tried other. We also have a LinkedIn group. LinkedIn is very different. We don't get nearly as much engagement on that, but it's been great for finding speakers for conferences and it's obviously a much more professional forum, and you can't, we've found, at least for our audience, that we don't get people to kind of do the back and forth quite as much on LinkedIn. So we mostly use Twitter, and then also Facebook. Twitter the most, and then Facebook probably after that. Each reporter and editor, as is the case in many of your publications, we all have our own personal accounts that we use to varying degrees, but we also have a branded Cablefax account that we have access to, and we're responsible for putting up, our stories. We actually, at our company, we have a person, her name's Kaylee Holtgren, who's in New York, and she really oversees, she's been assigned to oversee the website and social media, so she coordinates with us and kind of gets on us to post stuff if we haven't posted it. So it's good to have somebody like that who has responsibility on the editorial side and probably on the marketing side as well, so that they're kind of the point person and they can keep on everybody else and make sure that they're contributing what they need to contribute. On the marketing side, they also have access to these accounts. So we have to coordinate with them. They're posting marketing messages, obviously. If we have webinars coming up that they're promoting or events or conferences and that sort of thing, they're actually responsible for doing that. And one of the reasons that we both have access to it is that we want to mix. We don't want it to be all marketing stuff or all editorial. We want to mix it together so that nobody feels like our Twitter account or our Facebook feed is just literally just constant promotion of stuff we're trying to sell people. So we try to really get those integrated together. Mainly, this is kind of the meat of, I guess, what I wanted to talk about is just keeping the lines of communication open, and that's what didn't used to happen, as Ron was saying, and probably, and as you heard yesterday, apparently, it's still not happening in a lot of places. And I'll get into the church and state stuff, which is an important thing that shouldn't be thrown out. It really is. Church and state is important for the long-term health of every publication. You can get a lot of short-term gains. I'll talk about that in a bit. You can get short-term gains off of throwing away church and state, but over the long term, it really does hurt the credibility of the publication. So it's good to keep those, to keep some structure there so that there's sort of ground rules around that. But that doesn't mean you can't communicate, and that's kind of what we're talking about. What we did in January, we found that we weren't communicating enough, and this is back in January. We decided to have a little retreat where we brought in, we really had everybody. We had all the editors and the writers, and we had marketing. In that meeting, it was a 2-day retreat. We went off to an off-site thing. We had the ad sales people there, and we had the subscriptions person, who's great, there. And we really just, laid it all on the table, like what do we need to be doing better, et cetera. And one thing that came out of that was to have a daily social media meeting. And I can tell you that when it came up, let's have a daily meeting, everybody groaned and rolled their eyes, and nobody wants to have another meeting. And so we all kind of reluctantly did it, but it's been really the best thing we've ever done. In that particular meeting that we have every day, we keep it to 15 or 20 minutes. And what it is essentially the editor, all the editorial, me and I have 3 staffers are on the meeting, or on the call. And then we have our 2 marketing people on there. At least one of them, if they're off at an event or something, we have at least one of our marketing folks there, and then we have our subscriptions person there who's marketing our subscriptions. So she's actually part of the marketing department as well. And so we just sit there, and we started out doing just social media, where we were talking about who's going to post what today, and what are we doing today. Let's make sure that that we're doing everything we need to do. And it really just evolved into more of just a general planning meeting. And we talk about social media in it, but we talk about a lot of other things. And it's great because I can check every day. I can check. It's just a reminder to check with the marketing person. How are we doing on that webinar? How many registrations do we have? Is there anything Editorial can be doing? Can we do a Q&A with one of the speakers that would help promote that and that sort of thing? And I don't mind doing that. I know some reporters think that that's obnoxious or that's tearing down the church and state. But if I feel like, if we got a speaker for a webinar or for a conference or something, and we need to promote the conference, I have no problem. If we got the guy for the conference, we obviously care about what he has to say. So there's no reason why we can't do a Q&A with him or do some kind of story on the guy. If it also helps to promote the event, I don't have a problem with that. And as long as it's my decision. I mean, as long as it's ultimately up to us to do it, and nobody's telling me to do it. And that's the key, is that you have to have that openness, but also, and I'll get into some of that. The weekly group meeting we also have, that includes actually the publisher, my boss, the boss of all of us, ad sales, marketing, subscriptions, and editorial. And this is more of a, it's just a weekly meeting versus a daily one, so we get into more of the longer-term stuff and longer-term planning and what's been going on this week. It includes more people. The publisher, it's great having the publisher in on that. The publisher, I don't think, would have time or would need to be in those daily meetings. I wouldn't suggest that, but I think if you have any kind of weekly or bi-weekly meeting where you can get the publisher in there with everybody else, it's great, because if we've all been talking about things and trying to coordinate things and have ideas, right then and there in the meeting you can get the answer pretty much from the publisher, or you can get a sense from the publisher whether you want to basically go a different direction. Sure. The weekly meeting is about an hour. In our case, it's about 10 or 11 people. So it's including all these different staffs. We have, the publisher is obviously one person. We have 2 ad sales people, 2 marketing people who work directly on our stuff, 1 subscriptions person, and then 4 editorial. So I guess it's about 10 or 11. Sure. The subscriptions, well, in our case, this may not be the case with everyone. We have a publication that costs a lot of money. It's not we don't send it out for free. It's $1,200 a year. It's a very, very expensive, sort of exclusive executive summary type newsletter. So we have a person devoted to marketing that and getting site licenses, and she's sort of responsible. Yeah, she's a salesperson, yeah. Yeah, it's probably structured differently elsewhere, but at our company, we do have somebody who's only focused on subscription marketing and sales, and then we have the other 2 marketing people I'm talking about are basically, they're basically marketing everything but the actual publication. We have a lot of events. We have a lot of awards programs. We take nominations for awards programs that they coordinate. We have events around those. We have conferences. So all that stuff, the webinars, other things that we do that we market, they handle. Yeah. And that's going to be different everywhere, obviously. So that weekly meeting is really important, and it's good to have the publisher in on that because you can make quick decisions. I mean, that, and that's always a great thing. Constant email communication throughout the week is always important. I mean, that just goes without saying, but you'd be surprised in the past how little there was of that before we started having some of these meetings. I mean, one of the things that happens when you have a daily meeting with people you have never been talking to in the past is you become friends and you build relationships, and then you can actually email, and you're not yelling at each other all the time. You're being nicer to each other, and you know the person, so you're not going to just fly off the handle. I mean, it's really easy to do that, especially for reporters who are cranky anyway, right? If they don't know the person, you just send a nasty gram to you about something. It really keeps everything a lot more copacetic if you can have that kind of daily interaction, or even if you don't do a daily meeting, at least a weekly meeting, so that everybody knows each other, and so there's an actual relationship there between the 2 sides. And that just goes to being open and honest. I mean, everybody has to really say what they think during these meetings and during these email exchanges, but at the same time, being polite about it. That's sometimes hard for the reporters. Not as hard maybe for you guys. The church and state stuff, I wanted to talk about that a little bit because Ron alluded to it. And it does need to remain in place. But I think what has happened, and it's both what's happened with social media and the fact that clients and readers are now interacting a lot more with reporters and interacting a lot more even with the marketers because, people are on social media so much. It's also important that everybody keep those lines open. And while it's blurred, how I would put it is we haven't sold our souls yet. Meaning that the key, in my opinion, is that it's more about the communication and acceptance. Everyone has to buy into the idea, especially on the editorial side. And this is a problem, places, as you've mentioned. And reporters are very skeptical about this. But I think it's probably the job of publishers and probably the job of the marketing staff to just keep pounding on reporters and convincing them that it's not necessarily, you're not necessarily selling your soul if you're just communicating back and forth. It's as Ron said, I've had many cases where, especially since we started communicating more and having these daily meetings, where marketing will mention something to me about, well, these clients are saying that this area is really important, this topic is really important, or it's something they're really worried about or something like that. Have you guys heard the same thing? And I'll go, well, in some cases I'll say, yeah, we're definitely hearing that and we're planning to do a lot more on that. So let's talk about maybe, you can get them to sponsor a special report or something. Or I might say, no, I haven't heard that, in which case it's great that she told me that. Because now we can go look into it. It might create more editorial stuff for us to do. Sure. I think where the line would be crossed is if an advertiser came in and said, we will pay you $10,000 if you do a special report on our product, and we only want our product to be featured in that report, and and we want your editors to write it. I wouldn't do that. What was that? If it's an advertorial, this is just me. If it's an advertorial, I would not want the writers of Cablefax to be associated with it. We could freelance it out. A marketing writer could write it from outside, and they could. Advertorials have been around for a long time, so I don't have a problem with that. But if it's something, I would caution against that though when people try to push for that. And what we've done, because I don't think it has any credibility. I think people see right through it. And it really is just an advertorial, which I don't necessarily, that is part of the content marketing thing, and you have to be careful about, I think, how you present those things. And sometimes I think when you I almost think it's better to just be honest about it if a company wants to do that, to do their own blog, or to put it out themselves, rather than try to attach it to an objective news source and kind of try to tell people, well, it's sort of news, but kind of an advertorial. I think it's better to do either one or the other. But what we've done, we've had a couple of advertisers who've wanted to do that. And they will come to me and I will say no. But that's really interesting. So this company does lifestyle programming, this network, and they want us to just do a big thing on them. Well, how about we do something on lifestyle programming? And they would be one of many networks that we're talking to in the story. So we'd be talking to their competitors in the story. And a couple of times they've come back with that and they've still sponsored it. We still got their money. They were fine with that. They would have preferred it all been about them, but they were happy that we were writing about lifestyle programming on cable. And as long as it's something legitimate to write about, I don't have a problem writing about it, even if the idea came from the ad sales side. As long as I have the final say, as long as they're not looking at our stuff, there's no prior, they're not asking to see it and making edits and that sort of thing, which is the problem with an editorial. With an advertorial, and having internal editors involved in that, is that they then want, because they feel that's their thing now that they paid for, they kind of want the ability to edit it and to be the final say, which I think is just a creepy thing reporters don't like that at all. So I think it's better if it's going to be a full-on advertorial to go ahead and have it sourced from an outside writer or something like that, and not even have it go through the editorial department at the company. Sure. Yeah. We won't put our logo on it. Right. That sort of gets around,
the big
concern. Yeah.
It's a white label. We're not mentioned in any way that we're writers. But we always do, and I'm sure you guys would do a better job than a freelancer would do. Oh, thank you. I'm sure your writers and our writers certainly would do a better job writing this content than the freelancers. We've been given some quote-unquote native advertising, and it's dreadful. It's just really bad stuff. And so we are crystal clear that the Kiplinger editors had nothing to do with this content because it is so bad.
Yeah.
So we won't touch it.
Yeah.
But we do label it loudly.
Hi, I'm enjoying your remarks so far. I'm Meg Hargraves from CQ Roll Call, and we have sponsored blogs that we've recently launched off the rollcall.com website, and we call them Topic A, and I believe the Topic A defense is still live right now. And what we've done is we've brought on board one advertiser. It's a single sponsor. It's Lockheed Martin. And basically, they provide some content, and we provide some content. We repurpose 1 or 2 stories a day, and they provide 3 or 4 or 5 stories that are written by folks that they hire. So they're not in our newsroom. They're not affiliated with us. And the blog is nested inside the Roll Call website, but it's presented in a very different way from a user design perspective. So it says that it's advertising. The content that is theirs has like a different colored background, and it says sponsored content on it. It's very specific. Yeah. So, but it took a long time for the newsroom to kind of come along with that concept, and we're launching them only if we have a sponsor. So, right. But we can press these out pretty quickly on different topics depending on which sponsors come forward. So that's working for us on the ad side. And again, it took a while to get the newsroom on board, but it's civil and everybody understands it. But there are very, very strict rules about who does what, and that's really the key for making it successful, at least in our shop.
Yeah, I think in what both of you said, the rules are important, and just making sure everyone has buy-in. And I think, the truth is that a lot of reporters, and obviously I've been a reporter for a while, and I know a lot of them. They're just, we're kind of clinging to the old days. The old days were so great because we could just do what we wanted to do. People just bought advertising. No matter what we were writing, they just wanted to be in the publication. And I think partly with with what happened with the economy in 2009, just the bottom fell out of that advertising market. It's probably not coming back, and I think everybody is realizing that it's never going to come back to where it was. And we're also realizing that even if it did come back to where it was, that advertisers no longer are willing to do what they used to do, which was just to sort of blindly buy ads within a publication. And so it's requiring a lot of this blurring of church and state, and kind of having to come up with new rules for that, but also more work for editorial, which is part of why they're more cranky about it. I mean, truthfully, I'll just give you an example from Cablefax. This is a daily publication that goes out via email. We do a lot of other things as well, but that's our main flagship publication. And that is probably the most time that the editors spend every day. It's the most time-consuming thing we do, is putting that thing out every day. I came to work here about 7 years ago, and the publisher at the time, at about maybe February, would come into my office and say, "Well, Mike, we sold out the year." People have bought, because we're a 3 or 4 page publication. We purposefully keep it really short. It's supposed to be an executive summary. And so he'd come in and go, "The only other ads I'm going to sell are going to be if people want full pages, and we'll do the full page on the front or back, or we'll add pages if we need to. But for now, we've basically sold out the whole year." That's the last time that happened, And that's how people used to buy ads. They would buy all 52 weeks. They'd say, "We want one ad a week on page 3 on Tuesdays every week," and then somebody else would do Mondays, and literally had people spending that kind of money with us and making it that easy for us. So what we had to do as editors was just cover the news. And everything else was taken care of. The money was coming in from ads. We were happy. We just could cover our beats and do everything. And now we're in a situation where every week, the ad sales people are coming to us and going, "Well, can we do a special report on this? Can we do this? We need to repackage something here." And, we can't get them interested. We can't get the advertisers interested unless you're doing something really specific, or a special report, or a special section. And that just creates more work for us. So that's part of where the crankiness comes from. It's not just ethical concerns, although that's part of it. It's literally like the workload concerns that I think and a lot of reporters probably would not admit that because they don't want to act like they're lazy or something, and they're not. It's just that in the old days, everybody just kind of thinks about those old days, about we were always busy then too, but you could focus all your time on just covering what was happening in the news and whatever beat you're working on. And now you have to really think a lot more like a marketer, and you have to think a lot more like a packager of content, and how are we going to present this? And that's just not something that, with the exception of some magazines where that has always been a function of editors at magazines to think about packaging, but at more sort of breaking news type publications, which is kind of what we are, that's not something that typically in the past you had to worry about too much. And so it just requires different muscles in the brain, and I think that's part of it. But the truth is, and what has to get through to all of us who are on the editorial side, is that this is the new reality. And if you want to stay in this business, you can either work in this new fashion and work more closely with marketing and ad sales, or you can leave. I mean, you can just go do something else. I mean, if it disgusts you that the old ways of church and state are completely gone, my suggestion would be leave, because at least in the B2B world, this may not be the case at some of the big news agencies and maybe some of the last of the newspapers that are actually left, that are big enough to still have that complete separation. Especially in the B2B world, I think it's just the way that things are going. And you can either be a part of the solution. I mean, you can either stick around and make sure that there are good rules in place to make sure that it's still done in an ethical manner, or you can just sort of give up and throw your arms up and do something else. But it's not going to go back to how it was ever, in my opinion.
I'm at heart an editorial person, and I really like your idea of if you're going to have a sponsored project, that it be apart from your editorial team. But I'd take the 10 grand, and the reason that I would, and the way that I would sell it to my team, is that we do enough of those, then I can hire another editorial person and relieve some of their burden, et cetera. David used an expression yesterday. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was an editorial person who did sufficient work that it was a position that justified itself, something like that. So.
Yeah, no, that's, I think, a really important thing to hammer home, because a lot of times, I think reporters get it a lot more now than they used to, but it was kind of this little bubble that reporters had in years past where they didn't think about where the money was coming from. It's like how their salaries were getting paid. It's just like I walk in, I cover the news, I don't know what those guys are doing, salespeople and all that stuff. One of the things that because I'm executive editor, because I was always kind of more of a liaison type job between these different places, I've always known what they were up to and doing. But I think for my staff, it's been really eye-opening to be in these meetings now and to be hearing from what the marketers are doing every day, how hard it is, what they're doing, what the ad sales people are how hard they're working to try to bring money in to pay all of our salaries. And I mean, it's very obviously the people bringing in the money is very important. And I mean, it's not a bad thing to remind reporters that, yeah, maybe if we do a few of these reports, I know they're a pain in the butt, but they're bringing in money, and that will help not only us make sure that we don't have to lay anyone off, but maybe we can expand staff and get you some help at some point. It's always hard to get that. It's always hard to expand staff. We all know that. I mean, it's usually just a matter of making sure we can at least keep the number of people we have right now. That's usually how it goes.
I'm sorry.
Our situation is a little different in that we never had advertising in our for paid products. So what we have done is we've set up free publications that are daily blog-like things, and all the advertising is going in those, and those are known to be advertorial. So there's kind of that. We wouldn't do what you were talking about in the paid publication. Take something that we didn't believe in, but would be much more liberal in the known advertorial product as a way of dealing with it.
Yeah, and I mean, if that's working for you, if the audience is accepting that kind of advertorial, and as long as it's going to be different each place. As long as the editorial staff is comfortable with how you're actually approaching it, and it sounds like you guys are keeping it kind of separate.
We even have a different editorial staff working on that, and they
Yeah,
know
so
that's
it's a
what.
different- I mean,
And then
they know
the
what
other
they're
thing I meant to say was that, and the numbers are much bigger on the free one, which makes it more interesting to the advertisers as well.
Right. Yeah, that's true. just maybe a few key takeaways. You know, integrity matters is what we've been talking about. You have to maintain that because it's really important for the long term. You can take all this money and do everything and kind of throw away the whole church and state thing, and it'll bring in a lot of short-term money, but I can guarantee you that over the long term, people start to hear how you're doing business. They start to hear that you'll just accept any pitch from anyone and write about anything anyone wants you to write about as long as they pay you. And before you know it, nobody trusts a publication anymore. And over the long term, 5, 10 years out, it's basically gone. We're not doing nearly as well. So you really have to maintain that, and that's why it's important to have all these rules, I think. That's just my opinion. Consult, don't dictate. I really think that's important. I think that you'll get much better results and much better buy-in from your editorial staff if you don't just come in like a steamroller and tell them, well, we're doing this now because I'm the boss and I said we're doing it. Come in and explain to them why it's important, why it's bringing in, why we need to bring in this money. Explain to them that advertising is down 50%, or whatever you need to do. Explain to them the reality of the business. Bring them in on the business so that they understand why we need to do these other things to bring in money, to either expand the business, be positive. I mean, you know, it should be about growing the business ultimately. But explain to them what the situation is, whatever it is, so they understand, because a lot of times they don't know. They don't see the numbers you see. So just, you know, consult with them, and most of the time you're going to get that kind of buy-in. The sharing information is what we talked about with, you know, if an idea comes from ad sales or marketing because you're hearing things from clients, you know, share that with editorial. The same thing with editorial. I've many times heard stuff, we're covering stories, we're hearing things from sources. I will constantly be in contact with the ad salesperson telling them, hey, you know, we're working on this thing, we might do a special report. Do you think you could sell something against that? And then she'll say, well, yeah, let me check. I've got a few clients, I'll see. And then sometimes we've put together special reports that exact way. They don't have any control over what we're writing. It's not all about them, it's about a trend. So we're comfortable doing it. It's good for our readers, and great, you know, they paid us some money to sponsor it, so I'm completely happy with that. You have to have that sort of idea that everybody's in it together, and that's partly by explaining what the financial situation is, explaining how important it is to do these other things and what it means for the business. Don't be afraid to talk about the business with the reporters. I mean, they understand that. They're all business reporters, basically, so they get the numbers. So just go ahead and let them in on that. Don't keep that stuff a secret. And the long-term value thing, which I already talked about, is part of keeping the integrity up. So just to give a few examples of where we've collaborated. How are we doing on time?
Oh, okay, about 10.
Okay.
About 10 minutes.
I'll go through this real quick in case there are other discussion points or whatever. But, you know, just general engagement. We collaborate. For social, as I mentioned before, we share those accounts. We're helping each other with copy. I mean, marketing will come to me and ask, you know, we'll write the descriptions, like editorial will write the descriptions for, say, webinars we're doing or for conferences. I come up with all the panel topics. I write the descriptions. They then use those descriptions because, as somebody said, you know, obviously we're more in the trenches, and so we're going to have an easier time writing that stuff than marketing. So I'm happy to do it. You know, I have no problem. It's a little extra work, but we don't mind doing that. And sometimes I'll help out. They might write an email or an e-blast and run it by me or somebody else on the staff, and we might make some edits, which has been helpful, I think, for everybody. I mean, it helps us look better as a brand. I look at it as, you know, this is us presenting. People don't look at that email as coming from the marketing department. In my opinion, they look at it as coming from the publication that I'm a part of and probably think that editorial wrote it. So if it looks really bad, it reflects badly on me. So I want it to be as good as it can be. So I'm happy when they send that stuff to me and include me on that. And then webinars, we do a lot of back and forth, as I mentioned on that. We have a lot of awards programs and events. And I think, as I mentioned before, you know, if an event is soft or something, a lot of times we'll have kind of an emergency meeting and we'll say, well, what can we do right now? What can we do to help promote this event? And there might be things that editorial can do. And we happily do that because we know how important the events are, because it's been explained to us, and we all know how important they are to our revenue and to the health of our business. So we're all happy, as long as it has editorial, there's a reason to do it, and it's a good reason, such as Q&As. Like if we're inducting a bunch of people into the Hall of Fame, which we do in several areas every year, yeah, I mean, we can have Q&As with those guys, or we can do an article about something they're working on with a little, and we'll just shamelessly put a little teaser at the end, like, you know, this person will be inducted in the Hall of Fame at this event, you know, and put the link to the registration site. I mean, I don't have a problem doing that at all. So we help out a lot that way. And sponsored surveys is something that maybe some of you have done, but we've We've just started doing it, and we've only done a couple, but they're very interesting because you can get a sponsor who needs to find out. It's kind of interesting if they need to do a survey and find out something from their client base about what their clients need. We will work with them on questions for that survey on the editorial side based on our industry knowledge, and then we will use the results ourselves to write an article about the survey. They use the results for their own internal purposes, and we get money from them for the sponsored survey. They get a lot of branding that goes out when we're actually promoting the survey and that sort of thing. They're branded in the emails and stuff like that. It never really crosses over to editorial. We never have to do much with them other than coordinate a little bit on the questions. But we get sort of a free survey that got paid for that we can then use for editorial purposes on an industry topic that's interesting. So that's been kind of a cool thing that we've done a couple of times, and we're looking to do a little more of that. We have power lists, which are really interesting, and I don't know, some of you may do this, where you rank executives and that sort of thing, the top executives in particular areas. We have a lot of fun with that on social media because you can tweet out each one. You create a separate HTML link for each person, and then that person, they're going to tweet to all their staff, and their staff's going to retweet it and everything else. So that stuff can really go viral. Anything that's personal about particular executives and what they're doing. We're actually on our new website that we're about to launch. We're going to have a diversions page, which we're actually going to have executives out doing fun stuff. I mean, nothing to do with any of the businesses that they're in. If they like to ski, we'll have pictures of them skiing. We'll do a little thing about that. If they have a particular hobby, they play guitar, whatever the case may be, we would do an entire maybe article on that or Q&A and just have this whole section of the website that's just fun stuff. And part of the reason we're doing that is because that stuff plays so well on social media and can get us so many hits back to the website, frankly. It gets us way more hits than some of the serious articles we do. I mean, just some goofy stuff about somebody's favorite restaurant or the fact that they like to cook pasta or something or have a new recipe. I mean, that kind of stuff can just get interest back to the website. And again, I don't have problems doing that kind of goofy, fun stuff as long as it's helping to fund the serious stuff we do, which it is. We have conferences. We're going to do 2 next year. I know probably a lot of you do those. Those have been pretty successful, and like I said, a lot of that comes from the editorial side, but there's a huge amount of coordination back and forth with marketing and how we're going to present the different panels and how we're going to market those. So that's been really important. And just general brand promotion has been a big area, and tracking the competition has been a big area. They actually help. I mean, the ad sales and marketing staff hear things all the time about what our competition is up to that they then tell us, and it's been really important. And it's interesting for us to look at what they're doing. Like if we see them doing a conference or doing some innovative thing that's sponsored that we haven't tried before, you can steal from them. They steal from us all the time. So you can steal from each other, and it's good to have multiple people looking into that, not just the editorial side, but also the marketers and the ad sales people looking at different angles of the whole business and looking at what the competitors are doing across all kinds of different departments. Because it gives you ideas for new products and new ways to bring in more money. And that just goes to the brainstorming. So the only thing I would say is be nice, obviously. That especially goes for editorial. I will admit that we're not always the nicest people sometimes. By the way, just about that, just so everyone knows, when you go to journalism school, you come in and you're all bright and happy, and the minute you get in there, they start telling you that everybody's lying to you. The world is evil. You have to look out for everything. You'd be skeptical of everything. So, you get 4 years of that. That's part of why there's a little bit of that negative kind of attitude sometimes that comes out of editorial. And sometimes it's not even real. It's just a perceived thing. It's how people put their front on a lot. Like, I don't believe anybody. And so you just have to kind of ignore that. We're real people, too. We laugh and have fun. And think holistically about the brand, which is something that really is hard for editors to do, but very important these days. Not just what you're specifically doing on your beat, but to actually think about the whole brand. And I think it's really important for the marketers and the publishers to sort of encourage that and make sure that people are doing that. Empathize with what everybody's doing. The best thing about these meetings for us has been seeing all the hard work that the marketers and ad sales people are doing that we didn't know about. And they see how hard all the things we're doing that they didn't really know about either. And so that's been really good for both sides to just empathize with the other side and understand that everybody's working really hard. Everybody's working toward the same goal. It's all about helping the business ultimately. So That's part of why that constant communication is really important. That didn't used to happen in the past. And this is what some people talked about, if the advertisers and the clients are telling you something, or telling the marketers something, or telling the ad salespeople something, you should let editorial know, because it may mean that that's something they should be covering. And not for reasons that it's going to bring in money, but because it's just an important issue, because if people are talking about it, we should be covering it editorially. So let them know. Keep that communication open, and then be nice again. But that's it, and then I don't know if
No, that's great. We have a couple minutes for any other comments?
I just want to share a couple of things that we do as well. We're a small company, so by necessity, we all collaborate on marketing initiatives. But my background is also J-School, and overall, I oversee the content, but I participate like you do. I could relate a lot to a lot of what you said. I found myself nodding a lot. But one other thing that's really helped, I think, my editorial team get on board or understand the value is every week at our group meeting, our online strategy person actually shares things like this blog. People clicked through this blog, and it resulted in 3 new subscriptions. So she's sharing like the path and how people ended up subscribing. We also share very openly the financial information in our company, and we also share subscription levels, whether they're going up and down at every meeting, because when you hear that a big in-depth report that you put together and spent a lot of time on is actually resulting in a ton of new subscriptions, you've hit on kind of a gold mine. It's good for the publication because the readers, you're producing something that they want to read about, but it's also something that you need to capitalize in the marketing. You can't just let that sit. You have to, continue to write blogs on it. You have to continue, maybe produce a webinar on it. So to me, like that openness about where are these subscriptions coming from, what are people clicking on, has really helped us and really helped everybody understand why that communication has to exist.
That's such a great point. And the marketers will share with us now open rates on email blasts that they send out. And because they tweak the language all the time, and might, if we have some kind of something we're promoting, we have several bullet points, they might take one of those bullet points and put it up and test different ones, right? They might send out a bunch, and they're testing different emphasis type subject lines and things like that. And then, one will suddenly pop, and we get this big surge. And so I want to hear about that. Because that, whatever got emphasized there, we should be covering more. If that's what people are interested in, we should, that's one of the many ways that we should be figuring out what we cover. And journalists, I think in the old days, used to just kind of, as I think Ron was saying, we just kind of, whatever we want to cover is what we're going to cover. What we think is important, we're the people who decide what you care about, and that's just over. We have to listen more than we ever have in the past to what people want us to cover. Sometimes we do have to tell them what we think they need to hear. But more and more, I think we have to really listen to them. Yeah.
Maybe time for one more, anything? 1 or 2 more?
There's also one thing that we did just 2 years ago that I think has improved things at Kiplinger, but I think we have a long way to go, and that was we moved into a new building, and when we did, instead of marketing being on the 3rd floor and the editors being on 7, 8, 9, where I literally never saw them at all, except in the cafeteria. Now we're all on one floor. And I have to, I run into them quite literally. And that's improved things quite a bit. We had I had been with the company 6 years, and one of our senior editorial folks in the new building ran into me, and he said, Denise, I've never really quite understood what you do. Mm-hmm. And I looked at him and I said, that check you get on the 15th of every month? That's what I do. And he sort of, laughed, and I said, no, I'm not kidding. That's exactly the reason you get paid is because of what I do. And, we went to lunch, and I gave him a primer on, direct marketing 101 and how he gets paid. And it was a stunning conversation to him, and he had been with the company for a very long time. So I think, that's sort of anecdotal as to what, but I think proximity actually helps.
Yeah. And it's that mutual respect because, I think of it as it's sort of like a factory, like we're creating the widgets, like the editorial's in the factory, we're like little worker elves, like creating the widgets that then are being sold or promoted by marketing and ad sales. So when they come out of the factory, they're just going to sit there. They're not bringing in any money until you guys actually sell them. But at the same time, the mutual respect part is you wouldn't have that widget if it wasn't for the factory. I mean, you wouldn't have anything to actually sell. So it's like this definite, both sides need each other, very synergistic, so yeah.
Maybe just Eleanor, you want to wind us up?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple things that Ron and I were talking about this morning. Because I'm pretty much a one-person marketing department at this point, my editorial team has, by necessity, been part of my marketing team. It's a ratio of 6 to 1. The direct mail voluminous program that I have, the editors are actually responsible for creating the sample issues and proofing those folders. And sometimes that goes over better than other times, depending on how busy they are. But they've been pretty gracious about it. I do get a little bit of resentment, but the person who's most resentful is also the person who emails me all kinds of things about what my competitors are doing. And like, I saw this in one of your letters, do you think this might be better? So it's really, it's funny because it's like a little bit of resentment, but also a whole lot of participation. And let's see, last but not least, I can't read my own writing. What Ron and I were talking about this morning, which is I have copywriters that I go to quite a bit for direct mail, and we started thinking this year that it might be fun as well as a great idea to engage our editors more in marketing, and we actually hired some of our own editors to write marketing letters for direct mail. Some of them are really good at it, and we'll probably go back to them. So that was a really good decision, and it definitely made them more engaged. But I think you really nailed it when you said that it's important for editorial and marketing to work together just because of the new reality. And you can't, I'm journalism school too, I guess a lot of people are, and you can't just sit in a room anymore and write stuff and expect the marketing fairies to sell it. So thanks for a good presentation.
Yeah, I think this is a great topic and a to be continued topic for info locals and maybe in June also. So I want to thank Mike for coming.
Thanks, everybody, for being here.
You also want to shout out for your music, or I also
Yeah, I also do music stuff.
so we can get them to
I
bring.
need marketing for that, so I'll talk to you guys later.
All right. Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for listening.